The heartbreaking truth my dad revealed, and its life-changing impact on me. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. My dad gripped my hand and said, "I'm not your father." The words were colorless, like he had rehearsed them in a mirror and left the feeling behind. We were in our kitchen, birthday candles still coughing smoke, the chocolate cake leaning like it, too, had heard a verdict. I'm a hospice nurse. I live inside truths families whisper at the end of life. But this one cracked through me like thin winter ice. Dad, Tom, everyone calls him, had always been steady. The man who fixed our squeaky steps, who kept old receipts rubber-banded in neat stacks, who believed in doing right even when no one watched. I thought I knew the contour of his honesty, the way you know a house by memory in the dark. He said a hospital in our small Midwestern city mixed babies. He said he learned later, after something strange with insurance forms. He said he didn't tell me to protect Mom, to protect me, to protect everyone. Now, he continued, the hospital had reopened sealed records because a donor match search flagged my file. Somewhere, someone needed something I might be able to give. I felt my name detach from my bones. If this went public, if a reporter sniffed it out, patients I serve might recognize me. People would make a story out of my grief. I imagined a hearing room, fluorescent and unforgiving, where administrators measured my life in folders and policy lines. I asked Dad when he found out and why he waited, and he closed his eyes like he was bracing for surf. Tell me everything, I said, before the truth finds me first. He nodded, swallowed, and said there was one more thing I needed to hear. The next words he tried to say died before reaching my ears. He looked at me like the floor might open if he spoke. I realized the cake knife in his hand was shaking. His breath stuttered, then flattened into a long, practiced silence. Mom stared at the candles like they could burn time backward. Mara's chair scraped, loud as a gavel, and Dad finally inhaled. "Alex," he said, "your name appeared because someone might die without you." The morning after, I drove the familiar loop around our neighborhood because motion steadied me. My memories arrived as small, honest films. Dad tying my skates with thick mechanic fingers. Dad showing me how to check a radiator. Dad shoveling the neighbor's driveway after an overnight storm. No speeches, no grand gestures, just grit knotted to kindness. He wasn't rich, but he was wealthy in habits that kept a family upright. In hospice, we tell families that ordinary care counts. The second glass of water at night. The hand on a shoulder when words won't carry. I built myself on that idea. Back home, Mom folded laundry at the table like she was negotiating with gravity. "We love you," she said, meeting my eyes, then dropping them. Mara slammed cupboards, then apologized to the cupboards. "Why now?" she asked, and Dad said, "Because the hospital called, and because I can't lie anymore." He looked smaller than 63, older than the daylight. The secret had been sand in the gears of our lives. Now the engine shuddered. I remembered last month, after a tough shift, he'd pressed a gas station coffee into my hands and said, "Proud of the work, kid." I took it as routine encouragement. Now it glowed like a streetlight over a collision I hadn't recognized. If I wasn't biologically his, what did that make of the years? I knew the answer as surely as I knew the route to our hospice wing. It made the years exactly themselves. Still, the question not. If this went to a hearing, strangers would weigh intimacy like evidence. I tried to picture staying quiet. I tried to picture speaking up. Both futures hurt. Mara's phone buzzed. She silenced it. Then she set it face down. Mom asked Dad to start from the first oddity, no detours. He rubbed his temples and said it began with my baby box. The hospital bracelet was missing, he said, and I told myself stories. When I was 9, I asked why my baby box didn't have a bracelet like Mara's did. Mom said, lost in the move, and handed me a paper crane Dad had folded from an old receipt. It lived in the box instead, a strange substitute I loved anyway. Now Dad opened the hall closet and fetched the faded shoebox with a reverent caution that made my scalp tingle. Inside lay Polaroids, a lock of blonde hair tied with ribbon not my color, and an index card labeled A.W. Discharge. But my crib photo had a tag with B17 scrawled in thick marker, and our family album showed 809 taped to my bassinet. We moved floors. Mara suggested. We never left the maternity wing, Mom said, frowning. My phone pinged with a voicemail transcription. Hello, this is Sandra from Records Retrieval regarding restricted files associated with a neonatal case number. Please return our call. The number matched the hospital. Dad's mouth tightened. They called you? He asked, like fate had jumped the fence. Only me, I said, and the room shrank. I pressed the voicemail, heard a professional voice saying review, protocol, donor registry, time sensitive. I Googled the hospital's main line and matched it. No scam. Why didn't you tell me when you found out? I asked. He said, because when I learned, you were starting middle school, and then it was your first heartbreak, and then graduation, and there's always another reason to wait. He touched the paper crane. I thought I could wait forever. The words were an apology and a plea for understanding wrapped in old habit. We need records, Mara said, pacing. I said, we need calm. Both felt impossible. The voicemail repeated, time sensitive, and I felt a countdown begin beneath my ribs. Dad's face changed when he saw the crib tag mismatches. He whispered, I hoped you'd never notice, and now you have. Mom said, barely audible, there's more in the closet you haven't seen. I ordered an at-home DNA kit because certainty seemed like oxygen. As a nurse, I explained chain of custody to families. Who touched what, when, and how we keep samples safe. For a consumer test, it's simpler. A cheek swab, a barcode, a mailer, but my hand still shook. In 3 weeks, the site said, I'd have answers. Dad hovered like a man waiting for a sentence, stepping in and out of the kitchen doorway, as if the truth were a draft he couldn't quite avoid. Mom changed the subject whenever we touched the edge. How was Mr. Delgado's son? She'd ask, meaning my patient's caregiver, meaning anything that was not this. The avoidance wasn't cruelty, it was coping by choreography. I laid the timeline on paper. My birth year, a storage unit payment Dad made in 1994, a life insurance policy that doubled coverage the same month. I checked old photos. The discharge date printed on one didn't match the AW card in the box. I called the hospital switchboard and asked for Sandra in records. I left my number, my birth date, the case number from the voicemail. Mara texted a string of rapid-fire ideas. Lawyer? DNA lab? Press? I wrote back, first, facts. That night, I dreamed of 2 cribs facing each other across a hallway, my name slipping between them like a leaf caught in currents. The DNA kit arrived sooner than expected. I spit, sealed, and sent, then watched the tracking like a hawk, refreshing until my phone felt hot in my palm. I wanted relief. I feared the shape it would take. Dad tried to start a confession and stopped. After the kit, he said, I'll explain everything. The mail truck pulled away, and Dad stared after it like a hearse. Mom wiped the counter so hard the sponge squealed like a warning. Mara asked, if it's real, what happens to the name Father? I said, we don't answer that until the facts arrive. 5th day into waiting, the house sounded like people wearing their patience thin. Mara's laugh had an edge. Mom's quiet ran deeper. Dad's footsteps paused outside my room and then moved on. At work, I sat with a woman who asked me to read her church bulletin aloud because keyboards hurt her eyes. I like the announcements, she said. They make a week make sense. I envied that map. On my lunch break, I found a card paper clipped to my locker, Dr. Priya Patel, Hospital Ethics. A colleague had slipped it there. Priya's good, he said. She'll define the path, not the outcome. That night at dinner, Mara put the card in the middle of the table like a challenge coin. Call her, she said to me and then to Dad. We do this clean. Dad flinched at the word, and I knew it wasn't accusation but aspiration. We dialed. Dr. Patel's voice was slow water over stones. She explained mediation, review boards, how sealed records sometimes open when patient safety is at stake, how they balance privacy with duty to warn. First, you'll file a request, she said. Then we'll confirm identities through verified labs, not consumer kits. We'll set ground rules before any contact. After the call, Mara exhaled like she'd been underwater. We're telling the truth, she said, but we're not surrendering control. Dad nodded. I'll bring what I have, he said, which landed like a riddle. He disappeared into the garage and came back with a dented file box that smelled faintly of motor oil and cedar. Inside the box, a receipt fluttered forward like a moth startled by light. Mom's knuckles went white when she recognized the handwriting on a note. Mara asked, "What's that billing code?" And Dad wouldn't meet our eyes. I reached for the paper, and Dad's hand covered mine, trembling. The receipt was from June 11th, 1994, storage unit number 217, paid in cash, initials T. W. Scrawled in the corner by a bored clerk. T. W. for Thomas Ward, my father. Paper clipped to it was a yellow sticky note. Nurse Hobbs, 213 entry. Under it, a line of numbers that looked like a billing code. What is this? I asked. Dad said, it might be the night logs. I rented a unit to store some paperwork I wasn't ready to share. The unit key, taped to the receipt, felt cold as doubt against my skin. I Googled the code and found a neonatal care line item for prolonged observation. Why would that be on a sticky note in our house? Mara demanded. Dad rubbed his eyes. Because I wrote down anything that sounded like a clue when I first suspected, he said. Then I stopped pursuing it because I was afraid of what the answers would ask me to do. Fear can be honest. Cowardice can wear the same coat. I told them I'd go to the storage unit in the morning. Not alone, Mom said. We do this together. Dr. Patel emailed a form for record release and a simple explanation of chain of custody. Bring a phone camera, she added. Date stamp everything you photograph. Dad excused himself and stood at the sink, staring out at the small maple tree he'd planted when I was born. I thought I could keep you safe, he said to the yard. The kit's status changed to processing. The countdown kept its steady, quiet tick. At 9 a.m., the storage unit lock clicked like a polite throat clear. A cardboard avalanche settled, revealing a banker's box labeled Hobbs. Mom said, that was my labor nurse's name, and Mara swore under her breath. I lifted the lid and saw copies of neonatal logs with midnight smudges. The air inside the unit smelled like dust and a missing decade. We set the box on a metal stool and began photographing. Neonatal log pages dated July 3rd, 1994. A09 circled in blue pen. B17 circled in red. A 2:13 a.m. entry with a star and a note. Bracelet replaced. Ink smudged. Who replaced it? I asked. The signature line was an illegible curl. Another log showed 241. Temporary crib moved to annex hallway due to HVAC leak. That would explain different tags and photos, unless it didn't. We found a torn page tucked in a folder, the rip running through a line that read, parental counseling offered, and a fragment, error communicated. I wrote down the timestamps, took photos with timestamps, and emailed scans to my secure folder. Then an envelope, a letter from an ex-charge nurse, dated 2008, to Mr. Ward, referencing irregularities and a fear that a new audit would uncover retaliation-worthy mistakes. She had offered to meet. A phone number trailed off the page like a rope we hadn't grabbed in time. Why didn't you? I asked. Dad said, you were starting high school, and I told myself the meeting would make everything worse. Guilt had built a tiny city in his chest, brick by brick. We visited the hospital records office. Sandra confirmed my voicemail, then explained how a donor registry search had matched my anonymized profile to a patient needing a rare antigen-negative blood product for a marrow prep. No names until verification, she said. But urgency is real. On our way out, a woman in the hallway stared at me like she recognized my walk. She looked away when Mara turned, but her hands kept shaking. Dr. Patel emailed, we'll need sworn statements and a verified lab test. Dad stopped at the parking meter, as if buying time with quarters. We met an ex-charge nurse named Evelyn at a diner with cracked red booths. She ordered coffee, black, and traced circles in the condensation ring like it was a clock. It wasn't random, she said, voice worn. A chaotic night, short-staffed, a leaking ceiling, 2 babies under observation, 1 mother sleeping, another recovering from a complication. Someone swapped bracelets to cover a missed check, thinking they'd fix it after the shift. She stared at her coffee. They didn't fix it. They falsified one notation to make the logs look clean. She slid a photocopy across the table, a copy of the torn page we'd found, complete, showing the signature, Hobbs. Hobbs was under pressure, she said. Management hated paperwork messes more than care mistakes. Then Evelyn said the thing that altered the air. The other family lives across town. Their daughter, born that night, is very sick. The registry pinged your antigen profile. As a nurse, I understood the math. Same birth night, same irregularity, now a possible match. If I'm a match, I said, We start with labs, true chain of custody. Evelyn nodded. The hospital will try to control the narrative, she warned. Protect your boundaries. Back home, I sat in the driveway until the car cooled and the silence in the house felt survivable. Dad waited at the door like a man braced for weather. We need a lawyer, Mara said, softening the word with necessity. I agreed. We called attorney Elena Green, who explained mediation, statutes, and how settlements don't buy silence so much as structure it. First, confirm biology, she said. Then decide contact terms. You can help medically without surrendering your story. I asked Dad if he'd ever met the other family, and he flinched. Mom's eyes filled, then steadied, then emptied in a practiced blink. My phone vibrated with a lab appointment. Tuesday 9:30, verified testing suite. Mara whispered, if you save a life, do we lose ours? I built a plan because plans keep fear from spilling everywhere. Step 1. Verified DNA and antigen typing at the hospital lab with a strict chain of custody, sealed kit, signatures at each handoff, timestamps on every step. Step 2. Attorney letters to the hospital requesting preservation of records. No shredding, no routine purges, and notice of potential legal action if evidence disappeared. Step 3. A sworn declaration from Evelyn, notarized, attaching the log copies and the restored page. Step 4. Secure a meeting with Dr. Patel to define contact boundaries and how information would flow if I matched the patient. Step 5. Sit down with Mom and Mara and write what help would look like in real terms. What I could give, what I could not, what press I would refuse, what protections we needed if a reporter called. Attorney Green suggested we number the exhibits. Exhibit A, Storage Unit Number 217 Receipt, June 11, 1994. Exhibit B, Neonatal Logs with 213 and 241 entries. Exhibit C, Evelyn's Statement with Signature Sample. Exhibit D, Chain of Custody DNA Submission Forms. We printed and placed them in a thin blue binder. Dad watched my hands move like I'd practiced this for years. Maybe hospice had trained me for this particular bureaucracy of love. You don't have to carry us, he said. I carried you, I said, and I can carry a binder. That night, I wrote in my notebook, helping doesn't require erasing. Truth doesn't require cruelty. I slept, finally, beside a plan with numbered teeth. In the morning, hospital counsel left a voicemail that sounded friendly until the end. They said defamation, like it was a leash we should feel around our necks. Dad started to confess something else, then pinched the bridge of his nose. The caller ID flashed an unfamiliar number linked to a local reporter. When institutions feel heat, they spray politeness. The hospital's counsel called to clarify misunderstandings, reminding us not to jump to conclusions and avoid defamatory statements. I wrote the phrases down with the time and date. We're not publishing anything, I said. We're requesting records and verifying biology. Excellent, she said, voice dipped in honey. And please keep communications internal so we can ensure accuracy. After the call, Dad hovered like weather about to break. There's more, he said, and then the front door opened and a flyer slid under it. Community Stories Wanted, Births of 1994. A reporter was fishing. Attorney Green advised, say nothing until after the hearing. Control the story with documents. My lab appointment arrived. A tech explained each step. I read the labels like a man reading a map out of a storm. Sealed tubes, initials, timestamps. Uronegative with a Duffy-Null phenotype, she said, calm and efficient. Rare. Potentially critical for certain preps. I thought of the patient on the other end as a nameless ache. I could hate the system and still love a life. Dr. Patel scheduled a board review. Bring your exhibits, she said. Invite a family member for support. I chose Mara. Dad asked to come. I hesitated. Please, he said. If I cause this, I face it. I nodded. He almost said the rest and didn't. We ate dinner like people moving food through ritual. That night, Aunt Ruth's old clock bonged midnight, and Dad finally spoke. I met them once, he whispered, when you were 10, and I lied. Mom closed her eyes as if someone had switched off the room's gravity. Mara's fork hit the plate and chimed like an alarm bell. The mediation room had carpet patterned like lost coins and a long table with power outlets like docking stations for truth. Dr. Patel opened with ground rules. Respect, no recordings, documents on the screen and in labeled folders. Hospital counsel sat across from us with a pleasant face and a legal pad that could have been a shield. We're here to review evidence regarding a possible neonatal identification error in 1994, Dr. Patel said, voice even. She had presence. The room abated. I placed our blue binder on the table. Exhibit A, I said, sliding the storage receipt forward. Exhibit B, the logs. The screen showed 213, bracelet replaced, 241, crib moved, different tag codes. Exhibit C, Evelyn's sworn statement. Counsel's pen paused. Exhibit D, my verified lab results, antigen profile included. Dr. Patel nodded. We will confirm these via our chain of custody, she said. Then she asked Dad to explain a bank statement line from 2008, a payment to West Annex Assistance Fund. He looked at his hands. That was to help with a bill, he said. Whose bill? Mara asked. He swallowed. The other family's daughter. She needed therapy we could help pay for. I met them once, quietly, to pass a check. I didn't tell Alex because I thought secrecy would be kinder than confusion. The room leaned toward him like gravity had shifted. Counsel observed, we cannot acknowledge identities without verification. But even she didn't sound convinced of neutrality anymore. Dr. Patel asked if there were any additional documents we hadn't submitted yet. Dad reached into his jacket and produced a dog-eared photograph. In it, a girl with my eyes held a balloon at a county fair. He said, I kept this because I couldn't bear not to. The photograph puddled light across the table. The girl had my eyes and a cowlick at the crown, mine since kindergarten. On the back, in tidy script, Lydia, County Fair, 2006. Dr. Patel looked at Dad. Explain. He breathed through his nose, long and slow. I discovered the mistake after an insurance letter diverged from your pediatric records, he said to me, voice turned toward the past. I approached the hospital. They said it was a clerical anomaly, then hinted that making noise would hurt your mother's job prospects and our reputation. I found Lydia's parents through a whisper chain, met them once, brought a check for therapy copays. Her mother showed me that photo to say thank you. We agreed we would not blow up your childhood. He wiped his eyes like it embarrassed him. I carried the secret alone because I thought I was strong enough. He wasn't bragging. He was confessing a wound dressed as strength. And the motive? Attorney Green asked gently. Love, he said, and fear I'd lose the son I already had. Dr. Patel let the silence dignify the answer. Then she said, our verification confirms a high probability that Alex and Lydia were misidentified at birth. The donor match pathway now opens, if the parties consent. I felt the floor steady under me and then tilt again. Love doesn't cancel harm. Harm doesn't cancel love. Two truths sat beside each other, breathing. I'll meet them, I said, my voice surprising me by sounding whole. Counsel exhaled, maybe relieved to have a next step instead of a crater. Outside the room, a reporter waited by the elevator with a camera bag. He asked, are you Alex Ward? And I felt the story reaching for us. Mara stepped between us and said, no comment. We're protecting medical privacy. My phone buzzed with a text. Can you meet for coffee, Lydia's mom? We met at a quiet coffee shop that smelled like cinnamon and caution. Lydia's parents arrived first, hands folded like they were praying for steady ground. Then Lydia walked in, slimmer than the girl in the fair photo, pale, but with a clear fierceness in her posture. Hi, she said, and our voices overlapped on the same word. We laughed, startled by the harmony. We didn't hug, we sat. Her mother, Karen, had done her crying in a different room and came to the table with decision in her eyes. We wrote down our questions, she said, sliding a list. I recognized the impulse. We compared childhoods like we were examining parallel maps. Her allergy to penicillin, my childhood asthma, her love of sketching, my love of reading to anyone who would listen. Then we turned to the practical. My antigen profile matched the prep's need. I could donate blood products and, if necessary, go further if compatible. The hospital's transplant coordinator explained consent, risks, and timeframes in a voice trained to carry heavy truths across short distances. Attorney Green kept us anchored with reminders. Sign only what we understood, press no one. Meanwhile, legal notices began to arrive. Preservation letters acknowledged, a draft settlement framework sketched, an ethics report in progress. A local blog ran a coy piece about rumors. Mara stayed off the internet and held my phone when I faltered. At work, I took a leave of absence. Caring requires a full self, and mine was renovating. On donation day, I squeezed a stress ball and watched my blood circle purpose. Lydia's fingers were warm when she squeezed my other hand. Dad waited in the hall, wringing his cap until the seams complained. The coordinator said the next 72 hours would matter more than words. The transfusion did what medicine does at its best. It made room for breath. Lydia's color improved. The team monitored lab values with a vigilance that felt like prayer. I brought a small plant to her room, a pot hose, for giving to beginners, and set it by the window. "You're good at this," she said. "It's my job," I said, and then corrected myself. "It's my way." In the days that followed, we wrote boundaries in ink. 2 families, 2 histories, and new pathways between them that would not erase either lineage. We agreed on press silence, on shared access to medical updates as needed, on a plan if further donation became necessary. Therapy appointments began for all of us. The first sessions felt like walking a new hallway in the dark, hands out, moving anyway. Dad came to therapy too. He told the truth the long way around, then the short way. "I thought protecting meant hiding," he said. "It doesn't," I said. "Protecting means preparing people to endure." He nodded and looked, for the first time, lighter. The hospital's ethics findings acknowledged systemic failures, recommended policy changes, and suspended 2 long-retired administrators from advisory roles they still held. A settlement offered counseling funds, record corrections, and procedure reforms named after the night of my birth. We accepted, not to monetize pain, but to attach the story to safer futures. Sundays we kept our rituals: eggs, toast, the paper. Now there was sometimes a second breakfast across town, careful, tender, ordinary. One afternoon, Lydia handed me a sketch of a maple sapling labeled both. Dad planted a real one beside the first tree he'd planted for me. Mom stood with a thermos, pouring coffee like a sacrament of staying. Mara read the ethics report aloud, then folded it like she was done. I used to think identity was a fixed picture, framed and hung. Now I know it is a series of exposures, light accumulating, shadows telling their own truths, the final image richer than any single shot. My father's confession broke me along lines that had always existed, and then those fractures filled with gold, the way kintsugi makes a bowl more honest by showing where it has survived. Love didn't cancel harm, but it kept us at the table long enough to do something better than blame. If you find yourself in a DNA surprise, switched records, misfiled names, a history that returns with the wrong address, write everything down. List dates. Photograph documents with timestamps. Learn the words that matter: chain of custody, mediation, ethics review, so you can ask the right questions in the right rooms. Choose an ally who will say, "Drink water," when you're building an empire of panic. Boundaries are love in durable form. Sign them, keep them, revisit them. Help where you can without erasing who you are. On a quiet evening, both families came to our house with casseroles like we were all Midwestern after all. Lydia's laugh sounded like mine if it had grown in a different echo. Dad washed dishes with Karen's husband, sleeves rolled, trading tips about stubborn bolts and squeaky hinges. The maple saplings winked in the porch light, leaves like open hands. If the truth knocks, open carefully, but open before the door breaks.